Hello everyone, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon. This afternoon I have with me Gillian Roddie, and Gillian is going to speak today about, it's a two-phased schedule that she's going to have. She's going to be with us twice, and she's going to be looking at failing forward and the development of a growth mindset. And what came to mind with creatives and all of you in your craft and design enterprise is that I think you have a much tougher time than others in enterprise, because when you have something like an exhibition, it's yourself that's standing there, your passion for the work, your artistic integrity, and it's very important the way we view ourselves in these situations, because I always think that your creativity is so strong that it's awful to be in a vulnerable situation. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to Gillian. Thank you, Gillian.
Thank you so much, Emer. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm so delighted to be here, and thank you so much to Design and Craft Council of Ireland for having me today. I'm going to share my screen, so bear with me there for just 2 seconds. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. As Emer said, so today we're going to be talking about failure, and the aim today for me is that I want to challenge perceptions that you might have of this notion of failing. But before we get started, first things first. So what I want you to do is I want you to open up your chat box. So if you can find the chat box, it should be down in the bottom middle of your screen if you're able to see it, and open it up. And before you type anything, I'm going to ask you a very, very important question at the moment. And when I ask you the question, I want you to type the answer into the chat box, but don't press send just yet, okay? So I'm going to ask you a really very important question, and I'm going to ask it now. Now, I want you to type the answer to that. It's not a trick question, it's a genuine question. I want you to type it into the chat box, but don't press send just yet, okay? I'm going to give it another couple of seconds. Very simple and easy. And we're going to do a 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now hit send. I love that. This is just me getting simple joys out of technology. I love seeing answers like that popping up. I'm so delighted that people are doing well. Okay, so now that we have the hellos out of the way, I want to move on. Okay. So here's the thing. I work in education, and I have this passion about education, but not just in formal settings like in a classroom. Like every day really is a learning opportunity for us. Every day we have the opportunity to see things around us and to learn from them. And in educational circles, we talk about these 3 different zones that we can be in, that these are the most conducive to learning. So right now, because of everything that's going on in the world, the vast majority of us are very understandably somewhere in around our comfort zone in terms of learning, because we've had to retreat a little bit and we don't want to push ourselves too much, because let's face it, life is hard enough right now without doing anything that we don't need to do. And there's also many of us who kind of dip in and out of the panic zone. That panic zone, thanks very much, COVID, but the panic zone is when we're so under stress or under so much duress that the thought of learning anything is just not possible. It's when our cortisol levels have gone through the roof and we're not in a state that we're able to learn things. Where we really want to get to is this bit here, the learning zone. And we have to be in that state in order to be able to learn. So if you find that you're in your comfort zone all the time, if you're going through your day-to-day practices going, yeah, this is great, I know how to do all of this, there's a very good chance that you're not growing as an individual, and you're not growing in your business, and you're not growing as a creative. Now, if that's okay with you, that's fine. But it's rare that we find a creative who doesn't want to grow and develop. That's why you're creatives. And we have such admiration for that. So what I want to talk about today is that notion of getting comfortable in the learning zone. And here's the thing, in order to get into the learning zone, you have to start getting comfortable with making mistakes, because as adults, that's how we learn. So now we're getting straight into the hard stuff here. Now, I want you to think about an experience of failure that you have had. You don't need to tell me about it, but just kind of bring to mind an experience that you've had of failure. In the chat box again, now that we're comfortable with it, I just want you to throw out a couple of words that you would use to describe that experience. When you draw that, and you can go ahead and post it as soon as you want to. When you think about that experience, what are the feelings that come to mind? You know, what types of emotions or feelings does it draw up in you? No right or wrong answers here. Just want you to tell me about some of the feelings that you might have had when you've had an experience of failure. And this is a powerful question. This is not an easy question to answer. Yep. Now, so interesting. It is the same types of feelings coming through. We all experience failure in similar ways. You know, it's the same types of feelings coming through. I'm just going to give another couple of seconds just to let people put their bits in the chat. Yeah, lots of the same questions. And every time I ask this question, it is the same feelings that emerge time and time and time again. Now, that doesn't make it any easier, but it does mean that we all feel similar things about failure. So there is a sense of connectivity there. You know, what you experience when you fail at something, other people experience as well. Now, the chances is that if you were to describe that experience of failure to somebody else in the group, it wouldn't be those feelings that they would experience hearing us. They would experience something more positive. So the thing is that those feelings have been kind of built into us from a worryingly young age. Now, here's the thing, you know, anyone who's been around young children or has young kids themselves, you'll know that making mistakes is how we learn when we're small. If you watch toddlers or babies, they don't just sit up and stand up one day and start moving. It is a long series of iterations of making mistakes, of learning from it, of getting up and falling over, getting up and falling over again over periods of weeks and months. But it's try and try and try and try again. So right from our earliest years, we know that we can only learn if we make mistakes. And failure is a part of our day, and we don't even think twice. We learn how to throw things. We learn how to use language. We learn how to, you know, be social with our friends through making mistakes and learning from them. We can see that in any early years education. But then we get to our formal education system. And now all of a sudden, failure takes on a very different spin. Now, all of a sudden, there are such things as wrong answers, and there are such things as, you know, being lesser than other people according to the grades that we had. And everybody will be able to come up with an experience of being in school and realizing that they haven't done as well as they could have, and feeling those feelings of rejection and embarrassment and lack of self-esteem. And that kind of continues into young adulthood. You know, at the moment we have a formal education system, and it's no disrespect whatsoever to anybody who's working in that system. I think that our educators are incredible, but there is a problem with the system because it's teaching young people that there are such things as, you know, right and wrong answers within a very narrow focus. So we're learning that failure is a really bad thing from a very young age. And the big problem that we have with that is that it is not reflective of real life in any way, shape, or form. If you think about the progress track that we teach, you know, 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, it's not reflective of what they're about to experience when they go out into the real world at all. So we have a system where we're told that there are right answers and wrong answers, and you have to keep getting the right answers all the time. If you get the wrong answers, you're not good for much. So there's a problem. And so, you know, our mindsets are really challenged. For a lot of us, our mindsets they haven't evolved, they haven't adapted well enough to be able to cope with the normalities of failure on a day-to-day basis. And that's what I want to try and do today. I want to try and give us some ideas about how we can challenge that. Okay, here's another question. When was the last time you tried something really, really challenging? I want you to go into the chat box and have a think about, when was the last time you tried something really, really, really challenging? Like, really think about it. When was the last time you pushed yourself out of your comfort zone? Give me a month and a year, and let's see what we can produce this week. March, this week, today. Interesting. Love it. We've got everything from this week to circa 2000. I absolutely love it. And again, there's no right and wrong answers here at all. This is just for you to reflect on your experiences of failure to date. Brilliant. So what I would challenge you with is this question of, are you failing enough? And that's something that only you're going to be able to answer, because I'm going to go right back to one of my very first slides. If you consider it in the context of this model, and this is a learning theory model, it's a pedagogical model. We love using fancy words in education. But really, if you think about, those dates and those times in the context of this. So when I ask you, when was the last time you tried something really challenging? If it's a very long time ago, the chances are you're here and you have been here for a while. You've been in your comfort zone. Yeah, let's face it, your comfort zone is your survival mechanism. Your comfort zone helps you to stay safe. Your comfort zone helps you to function on a day-to-day basis. For those people who said that it was really, really recent, great, but there's a chance if you're constantly putting yourself in the challenge, all the time, is there a chance that you might be inadvertently pushing yourself into the panic zone all the time? Like, if you find yourself challenging yourself constantly, but not giving yourself time to reflect. Based on the answers, you will know how much you are giving yourself an opportunity to stay or to be in the learning zone. Okay, so that's something for you to have a think about. Now we'll go back through this. Where are we? So that's something for you to ask yourself. Are you failing enough? Now, there's different types of failure, and a preventable failure is kind of what it says on the tin. A preventable failure is something that you might have had the knowledge and the ability to prevent, but you didn't invoke it. Or it might be that you had an option to get more knowledge, as in, did you try a new venture, or did you try a new strategy or a new plan, and you didn't arm yourself with the knowledge that you had available to you? Or did you neglect to talk to somebody, that you could have got more insight from? So the preventable failures are the failures that we want to try and avoid. Very often, it's the preventable failures that are the ones that are going to cause us a lot of that embarrassment and the fear and those desperately, those difficult feelings that we have when we talk about failure. So the preventable failure is the one that we want to go, do you know what? I'm going to try and avoid those wherever I possibly can. We also have these things called complex failures. Now, I'm going to go straight for the big one here. We've got the Titanic here, but you could also use Chernobyl if you wanted to go for the big example. But a complex failure really is, again, what it looks like. These are the unavoidable failures. They happen when there's a kind of an unavoidable mix of needs, people, problems that have never occurred before. And there was really no way of you being able to foresee that was going to happen. Anybody who has had, something go wrong in the last 12 months as a result of COVID, if you are considering that as a failure, I would urge you to take it very, very easy on yourself, because that's a complex failure. None of us could have predicted the impact that COVID was going to have. Came out of nowhere, to us anyway, and it has had such a massive impact. So These are the complex failures. These are the ones that we need to be gentle with ourselves and say, do you know what? I did everything I possibly could. It still went wrong, and you can still learn from it. What are the mitigation plans that you can put in place in order for you to do better next time? And then you have these things called intelligent failures. And these are the ones that I would really love everybody to have a proper think about. So I work a lot with innovators and with entrepreneurs, and we talk about this notion of failing forward all the time. So with failing forwards, if you can imagine, if you have, sorry, I've got a point coming in my head, and I'm just realizing we're talking about creative, so I'm trying to make it really, really relevant. Have we got anybody, and tell me in the chat box, is there anybody here who, through your creative processes, do you do drafts, or do you do, prototypes, or do you do testing or anything along those lines? Yeah, brilliant. Why? Why do you do drafts? What's the purpose of doing those? To test, but what does that mean? What does testing mean? Making improvements. Too much pressure if it was the final product from the start. Absolutely. Failing forward or intelligent failure is to establish your idea is working, to minimize points of failures. Absolutely. Failing forward is expanding on that idea of, it's trial and error, and we make sure that we learn from it. So failure is actually something that can be very, very empowering if you plan to fail from the outset. So what you see here on the screen is, and this is, it's been coined the intelligent failure learning and innovation loop, which is a Silicon Valley invention. Anybody who's got a background in experimentation or in testing, it's sort of doing, it's testing, but with very, very fancy language. But this is the type of failure that we really want to try and embrace on when we're doing our processes. Every time we step out and we look to do something, we plan to fail at some point. We embrace the fact that mistakes are going to get made. But that's how we learn from it at every stage. So you can take that notion of, if you're doing testing within your creative process, you can use that testing approach for all sorts of different planning scenarios. So what you want to do is you want to expand on that and make sure that, I'm trying to think of a scenario that it would apply to. And if anyone has any ideas or anything that we want to explore or examples, stick them in the chat box and we'll try and kind of pull them apart a little bit. So what we do in innovation circles is we do what we call iterations. So that's what we call testing. Has anybody got any suggestions as to how we would avoid preventable? So go back to this one here for a second. Oops, where is it? Preventable failure. In the roles as creatives that you have a think about, what can you do in order to avoid preventable failures? What are the things that you can line up for yourself today or tomorrow or next week in order to make sure that you avoid preventable failures? Brilliant. Great suggestions coming through here. I'm going to pull out one or two of them. Now, research. What a great word. When you say research, what does that mean? What does research mean? Because it's a small word with a big, big meaning, with big implication. Evaluating as you go, double checking, lots of lists. Hi, Terry. There's some great examples, but what I would be pushing everybody to do is, what do all of those mean? What does research mean? When you're absolutely right, doing research. Great one from Monica there, analyzing competitors. You can learn so much from what other people are doing. Watch what they're doing. Like, very often what other people are doing will tell you a huge amount about what the boundaries of what you're about to do are. Especially, what we're finding is that within our world, say within entrepreneurism or entrepreneurialism, and even within the creative world, people are very, very willing to talk about what they've learned. If you go back in that chat, think about all of those very difficult feelings that you talked about in terms of failure, the fear and the embarrassment and the regret and the disappointment. We can assume that human beings are decent people. And by and large, where we can, we like to help other people to avoid making the mistakes that we did. So talk to people, find out what advice they would give you if they were doing something similar to what you were doing. Gathering informed opinions, another super duper one. Yeah, we could pull apart what informed means, but we probably don't have time to do this. So let's just see what else. Be open to constructive criticism by co-workers. Dan, we could have a party unpacking that one. We could have an absolute party with that one, but you're absolutely right. It all depends on what we consider constructive criticism for ourselves and for other people. So there's some really brilliant ones. So when we talk about doing research to prevent failure, in terms of, entrepreneurs, and I know it's a bit of a fluffy word, but I'm going to assume that that's anybody who has a product or a service to sell or to barter in any way, shape, or form. The number one thing that causes failure for people who are entrepreneurs or for people who have a product or a service to sell, the number one thing is lack of market research. You have made something, and I've no doubt that it's something absolutely incredible, but are there people out there who want to buy it or who want to rent it or who want to use it? And that's the big question. That's the number one question that causes failure for most people. They don't go out and they don't research the market that's there. It's not a case of build it and they will come at all, because we need to make sure that if we build something, it happened to me. I had to swallow my own pride this very week when we realized that we had set 2 sessions for our students and we didn't have the sign-up attendance that we had anticipated. And somebody said, did you ask the students if this was the right week for them? And I had to put up my hand and say, I didn't. I did not ask them. I assumed that this was the right week for them. So I had to learn from that. That was my failure this week. I did not go out and I didn't find out if it was the right time for them. If you're putting on an exhibition, are you going out and you checking if it's the right audience, if they need it, if it's wanted, etc., etc. So research is that it's one word with huge, big meanings. Vanessa, ask people I might know who have an interest, experience in this research. Yeah, absolutely. The thing is that, preventable failure is actually, it genuinely is very, very preventable. It's not something, these are the types of things that we don't easily consider on a day-to-day basis. So there's loads of really, really great examples there. Does everybody understand how you do go out and research the market? I hope that I can happily answer that. Dan said, don't create a solution to a non-existent problem. That's exactly it, Dan. That's exactly it. You don't, it's not that they will come if you build it. Fantastic. Okay, so coming back to our intelligent failure, our learning and innovation loop. Has anybody got any ideas of how could you potentially put that into practice? What could that possibly look like? Or how could you do that, in a real world situation? I'm asking you to maybe translate some of that idea into something that you would use on a day-to-day basis. Get your product in front of test consumers. Yeah, and it's a great suggestion, Monica. And it's a great idea. And sometimes we can use very fancy language like test consumers, oh, focus groups, and how am I going to show it to your mum, show it to your brother, show it to your best friend. You know, we've got people all around us. We assume that these things have to be really formal, and we have to engage in processes that are, you know, very fancy, and that have to go through very rigorous processes. Not at all. You know, there is absolutely nothing wrong with, you know, testing with a very, very casual market. That is a great question, Nicola. Instagram likes is an indicator of market interest. That's a great question. Now, some things to consider with social media, particularly on a social media with a site like Instagram. There is, first of all, it's, you know, it's a biased selection. So the people who follow your page, you know, they will follow your page, but there is no guarantee that you will be able to convert all of those social media followers into customers. So you might have, you know, 6,000 followers on Instagram, but unless you, and how do you find that out? You know, how do you find that out? How, if they would potentially be convertible into customers? If you don't already look at them, you should check out the insights that you have. So you can get quite a lot of demographic data about your customer segment, who you're speaking to on social media. And that will give you an indicator of, let's say, if you're, you know, say for my Instagram, I know that it's women. I think it's 97% women between the ages of 25 and 44. So that's who my customers, if I was to have a product, would be. But that doesn't mean that all of them, all of my followers, would necessarily be customers. Social media is not a measure. It depends what you're measuring, Adele. Like, it depends, genuinely, it depends what you're measuring. And social media can be really valuable for these things, but you're right in that you can't hang your whole hat on it. It's not the only research that you could do. So yeah. How else could you implement? Is there an easy way for you to implement something like an innovation loop on a day-to-day basis? What else could you potentially do? Anything else? Does anybody use, you know, notebooks and work some reflection time into your day? Fantastic idea, Heather. Reflection is another one of those words that we use quite a bit. And reflection is a lot more difficult than we give the word credit for. And that brings me nicely onto where I'm going to go next. So in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to be, because there's some fairly juicy concepts in this, and I didn't want to put too much into this. For the next session, I think it's a couple of weeks' time, I'm going to be talking in more detail about what we mean when we talk about fixed and growth mindsets. Relating to failure, this is a really nice way of describing it. So a fixed mindset is a mindset that looks at the column on the right, and a growth mindset is a column that would tend to look on the left. So do you remember all of those words again that we were using earlier on? You know, the embarrassment and the hurt and the disappointment and the difficulty and, you know, the challenges. Now, those are all very real and they're all very normal feelings to have. But we can also say that they tend to be something of a fixed approach to mindset. What if you were to look at all of those experiences of failure that you had, and you were to say to yourself, what did I learn from it? I guarantee you learned something. It might have been that you learned to never speak to that person again. It might have been that you left behind an idea that you had, but you learned something. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not suggesting that we just flip all our failures and we forget all our feelings and we let go of all of those very real, very challenging feelings that we had. But can we find the learning that can sit alongside us? That's the key. So being a failure is a very permanent state of mind. If you thought about that experience of failure and you were drawn right back and you thought, oh, I'm such a failure, and even to this day I can feel how bad I am at doing these things, and it's ridiculous, and you know, that's a very fixed mindset. What we want to try and do is we want to try and edge ourselves into seeing it as failing, because failing is a verb as opposed to a failure, which is a noun. Being a failure is a thing that we are. Failing is a thing that we do. It doesn't define us. It's an action and we go through it. It's temporary. It's a setback. It's a disappointment. It is something, and we're absolutely entitled to have all those very, very difficult feelings, but the feelings will pass. But it also shows, and you really should congratulate yourselves in a funny way, because for all of those feelings, it means that you were prepared to stretch yourself. You stepped outside of your comfort zone to go get to that place. You stepped into that zone where you were beyond your comfort. You were doing something challenging, and that's something that you should be really proud of. And it's a journey. So that's what we're going to look at next time round, not just in relation to failure. It's also in relation to fixed and growth mindsets. It's all about how we approach who we are and our capacity to learn and our capacity for knowledge. So we'll concentrate a little bit more on that next time round. So to come back to Heather's point about reflection. Reflection is about looking at the role that we play in our behaviors and what we have learned. So reflection isn't about, well, jeepers, Sue said this and it was just shitty and I didn't enjoy it, and that person did this and I couldn't go. Reflection is about looking at our roles and our behaviors in a particular instance. So it's like me saying, this week, I made a mistake. I neglected to ask the students if it was the right time to do this, and I need to do better at that the next time. Not saying, well, this person could have done X, Y, and Z. Okay, so I'm kind of conscious of the time. I did want to leave a little bit of time for questions. Is there anything that we have discussed there today that anybody wants me to pick up on? What I'll do is I'll just do a very quick run through of all of those, because that's a lot of stuff that we've talked about today. So to recap, we talk about this educational model where in order to learn, we have to step outside our comfort zone. When you're in your comfort zone, you do not learn, because it's your comfort. It's the definition of your comfort zone is it's the stuff you know. You can't learn if you're only surrounding yourself with the stuff you know. We want to try and avoid panicking because that's just too high stress. And where we want to get to is that learning zone, pushing ourselves comfortably, ironically, but not outside our comfort, but pushing ourselves in a way that we accept that making mistakes is going to be part of the journey. And we do it with the growth mindset. We are going to go forward with a failing as opposed to a failure mindset. So we talked about, the feelings that can occur when we have failures when we are failing. And there is such a connection available to us there that we all feel the same thing. And so it's good to know that we're not alone there. Failing is embedded in us from a very young age. So the fact that we have quite a visceral reaction to it is completely understandable. But we also have the opportunity as adults, with the knowledge that, life doesn't go like that we can say, okay, well, actually, if failure is an inevitable part of my life, I now have the opportunity to embrace it and go about it in a way that will help me to grow and to develop. We looked at, you can ask yourself, only you will know about how much you're challenging yourself at the moment, and is there an opportunity for you to perhaps challenge yourself a little bit more? And the 3 different types of failure. Preventable failure is the one we want to try and avoid, but there are lots and different things that we can do to safeguard ourselves to avoid that from happening. Talking to people, from going out and doing research, from testing the market, from talking to our potential customers, see what else is out there. Now, the vast majority of new ideas and new innovations are not actually new. They're sort of what's already existing with a slight change. So how can you apply that to what you're doing? The complex failures are the ones that really, they're very unavoidable, and we need to be easy on ourselves when it comes to those complex failures. Where we want to strive towards is this idea of intelligent failures. How incredibly empowering to say from the outset, I'm going to get stuff wrong and it's going to be great. If you tell yourself that you're going to get stuff wrong, you've taken the fear right out of it. Knowing that it's going to happen allows you to go forward, embracing it and learn from it, because you'll have a much more open mind to those mistakes that are about to be made. But you make clever mistakes and you learn from them. And next time around, we're going to dig into this idea of a fixed versus a growth mindset. Because if this notion of failing is still very, very uneasy with you, we'll talk about that a little bit more the next time. So,
Gillian, I think we need to pipe you in each of our bathrooms or sitting rooms, kitchens, or wherever we are in the morning. And just before you go back into the chat there, I loved your kind of a design process and the thinking process.
Yeah.
And if I was talking about my years of experience of working with craftspeople, I think they are already predominantly on the left-hand side of the diagram rather than the right-hand side of the diagram. And it's just because you're going to tease out an awful lot here. You know, I mean, it's one of them saying making something fails, not catastrophically. It's a form of learning.
Absolutely.
Back to my rubbish at the beginning where I said, I mean, I have the greatest admiration of somebody standing at the opening of their exhibition.
Yeah.
You know, what are the critics going to think? What am I going to think? Is anybody going to show up? You know, I mean, I can hide behind a desk and know that it doesn't matter if no one shows up. That kind of thing.
Absolutely. And I think that it's I would in no way, shape, or form be as incredible as many of the people that I know that I'm speaking to. I mean, I'm creative in a small way, but even I know there's that experience that you have as a creative of doing those incredible things. It's not acknowledged very openly, the very complex feelings that are involved in a process like that. It's just expected that it's something you do. Oh yeah, you're opening up an exhibition, fantastic, that's great. But how many people really understand the complexities behind that, the risk that you've taken, the understanding that the fears and the worries. So the majority of people out there probably are failing beautifully, but perhaps don't give themselves enough credit for it. And if that's the case, if you are somebody who you find yourself that actually you go, oh wow, I do this stuff, then it's time to give yourself a pat on the back, because you really are embodying the type of attitude and approach. I guarantee you, I know a lot of people involved in entrepreneurialism who they would kill to have that type of approach to the work that they're doing. So yeah, creatives are underserved and underappreciated. It's the endless story.
Are you seeing some of those there in the chat box?
Let's see. How can you tell the difference between your panic zone versus your learning zone? That's a great question. So, when you're in your panic zone, think about a time when you're under a severe amount of stress. Your thoughts are racing, you can't concentrate, you might even have brain fog. When you're highly stressed, you're not rested enough, you find yourself, you've got very little attention, you're flitting around. But most of us have been under a huge amount of stress over the last 12 months. Your panic zone is when you've shut down because you're under too much stress. Your learning zone is, I'm sure this is the audience to say it to you, how many of you, if I was to mention being in flow state, do you know what that means? I'm sure everyone's going to go, yeah. Hopefully everyone's, do you know what I mean when I say a flow state? Flow state, again, it's one of these fancy terms that's been used now. Please forgive me, I can't ever, yes, it is, Stephen, isn't it? This is Mihaly, I can never pronounce it. It's this book. It's about flow. It's kind of a concept in positive psychology, and it's that idea. So I'm going to describe a situation to you. You are in your favorite room. You've got your pen in your hand, your paintbrush in your hand, your pencil in your hand. Your hands are on the keyboard, and you begin to work. And next thing you know, 5 hours have gone by, and you realize that you have been in a state of euphoria for that whole 5 hours. That's what we call flow. And that is, in positive psychology terms, that is one of the ultimate purposes that we can potentially have in life. But that's also, those types of flow states, that's your learning zone. That's when you're in a really good frame. Now, you don't need to be in flow state all the time, but what you want to do in order to be in your learning zone is you want to be open to learning. You want to be able to reflect properly. If you're able to say, okay, well, I tried this today and these are the bits that went wrong. And okay, I need to try that differently tomorrow. And you know what, I could have done a bit better here, but I definitely did my best on that. That's when you're in your learning zone. When you're going, this is throwing it all out the window, you're giving up, that's potentially a state at the time that you're in the panic zone. So it's all about resilience as well. Resilience isn't about just going for it. Resilience is about knowing when to stop and pause and take a second. I hope that helps.
It's helped. There's one here that I'm picking up a thread, and I think it's a really important one.
Yep.
Where Dana said he's found that the most catastrophic craft business failures are due to debt, poor marketing, and financial issues. And if I could tack that in with Idel has also said financial limitations cause anxiety. How can we move financial limitations and stresses into the failing rather than the noun of being a failure? Because I do think that is a really challenging one.
Absolutely. I think what you can essentially ask yourself is, the financial limitations, are these things that are outside of your control? If something is outside of your control, why would we personalize it as a failure? If we have no hand to play in something, there can be multiple reasons for financial limitations. And we have to ask ourselves, this is where the reflection piece comes into it. If the financial limitations are as a result of perhaps poor decision making or poor marketing or something that we've done, we can learn from that. We can reflect on it. But if the financial limitations are due to COVID, if they really are situations outside our control, then we have to try and park it as part of a complex problem that we didn't have a direct hand in. Anxiety is potentially, it's something different altogether. So anxiety is worrying about something that may or may not happen in the future. Failing is something that has happened. So they're two separate things. You can have anxiety about failing, but that's about the anxiety, not about the failure or the failing in the future. So they're actually two slightly different things. I hope that answers or addresses some of the.
It does. What do you think of this one? Money is not a problem. There is no money.
Well, if we're going to get existential of a Wednesday afternoon, I probably need a glass of white wine. It's that the issue of money and finances is always a huge one, particularly in these circles as well. That there'll be different approaches to it. I'm always slightly reluctant to go down the route of either demonizing or capitalizing money, because it has so many different meanings to different people. People to place very different values on it. COVID is a black swan event, but looking risk management is essential in craft. Absolutely. I think that again, we'd have to be very easy. COVID really is an extraordinary I know with this word is so overused, it is unprecedented. Ironically enough, the World Health Organization, we have been warned that a pandemic was on the way since as early as about 2009, certainly 2016. But at the same time, we never could have predicted the impact that it has had. But absolutely. There is a huge amount of risk management strategy that can be gleaned from how we've approached. So that's one of the things that I would suggest if somebody wanted, a tangible, something for their to-do list. Put yourself, we were talking earlier about being, going into research, and doing research. Who has thrived? Who has thrived during this? Who are the people within your industry who have done it right? What did they do right? Did they do it right out of sheer luck, which is very, very possible? If you look at the successes of some of the greatest, new innovative businesses, luck has a lot to do with it. But what can you learn from how other people have succeeded coming out of COVID or coming through COVID? Is there anything that you can adopt from that? Like I said, we don't always have to be reinventing the wheel. We can look at other people's ideas and be inspired by them. There's a difference between copying directly and being inspired by. COVID is a long-term problem essentially, so there is still a lot of uncertainty around, and it's very challenging to navigate our way through that. But at the same time, we can put in place mitigation processes to help with that. So Heather, you're right. People with a good online presence have essentially thrived. And I'd say it's not even just having an online presence, it's having an online presence that has been reactive to the emerging needs, because even our use of technology has changed quite significantly. 12 months ago, very few people over the age of 25 had heard of TikTok. I had to delete my account because I was spending so much time on it. It is so addictive. I was really one of the old people using it. But, there is a great example of a technology that it was blind luck. It was blind luck that has now made it one of the biggest competitive products to the Facebook group. Time vamper, that's a great way to describe it. That's exactly, I had to delete it. No, I can't do this anymore. Switch it on an hour and a half later, it would all be, my time would just be gone.
Talking about the online presence, that has been really important, but there are elements within it that you need to make sure that your checkout is really functioning well. And I hate to plug this, but we have really addressed the online piece for all of our clients. And would be very keen that if anyone isn't already doing the e-commerce bootcamp, that they do sign up. Okay.
That sounds amazing. And Emer, that speaks to the point that I was making earlier on. Having, Heather's right, having a good online presence is great, but are you converting them into customers? Because you can have 1 million followers, but if they're not purchasing, what's the point? Have 2,000 followers, but 50% of them are loyal customers who will repeat purchase. So it's not necessarily bigger is better where social media is concerned. It's about creating valuable relationships with your customers. And that's where the really big research piece comes into it, really understanding who your customers are. And as somebody who works in the field, if DCCI, it sounds like they're providing amazing resources to you. You can't have enough of those. I'm plugging yours even for you, but it's yet all of those types of resources. Are using social media as a consumer is vastly different to using social media as a seller or as an entity, a selling entity.
Okay, you see that one from Emer Ward, Hal?
People are having to pivot on a daily basis almost. The problem for creatives is not being able to forecast. You can't forecast, it's difficult focus. Yeah. Emer, I recognize your name. How are you? Yeah, it is absolutely. We all have whiplash from pivoting so hard. We really do. Even in my own field, we got we got a little bit lucky because we had existing technologies in place to be able to bring our product online. So that was there. But this is a really interesting point, because ultimately your product, depending on the nature of your product, but if your product is a creative product in nature, its core value will not necessarily have had to change. Your product will still have the same core value if you're working as a creative. And I'm thinking about it like a non-technology based product or service. So that hasn't changed. So which parts are you actually having to pivot? Is it, pivoting, how you reach your audience? Is it pivoting how you market? Is it, so the essence, it's figuring out what's your VP, or your value proposition. What is the essence of what you do, and that will likely not have changed it will have changed, but not changed consistently. It's very difficult to talk in generalizations about those.
I am absolutely delighted, Dan. I didn't pay Dan, by the way. He says we've done a great service to craftspeople. But Dan, and everyone, I want to know how we can do more. I want to know how I can improve, how we can improve. So with the danger of getting too many suggestions, can you please send them to me? If there's any speaker that you'd like to hear more of, I'm going to have Gillian back. Today's been really successful. Please, can you just email me and let me know what your needs are? That'd be absolutely great. Gillian, I am absolutely delighted with today. I'm going away on a kind of a motivated buzz, and I think I'm going to take a screen grab of this and put it in my bathroom.
I love it. Maybe that could be my new creative service. Maybe I need to start creating wall hangings about asking people, are you failing enough?
You can maybe team up with someone in the audience,
Absolutely. I'm always open to ideas.
Okay. Your next session would be, I haven't the schedule, but it's 12th of May, isn't it?
Is it the 12th of May? Yes, 12th of May.
Just
a couple of weeks' time.
Monique's question, it's the 12th of May.
Yeah.
So anyway, we will talk soon. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. It was an absolute pleasure. And Emer, yes, they are recorded, and it'll be up this evening or tomorrow. Okay. Thanks you so much. Thanks
a million, everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye, everyone. Thank you.